a lot of youth bikers, which we expect that when face-to-face education comes.
For me, Intramuros would be actually the soul of a Manileño, maybe even the soul of the Philippines, because this is really where Manila and how the entire country was known. There is that special place in history for Intramuros. And so I believe it is our soul. I think Intramuros is important because if you do not know where history started, if you do not know where memories came from, then you will be lost. And so I urge everyone to even read a few chapters of books written on Intramuros, so they will just know how life then was and how it evolved to life now. We have here close to 400, if not 500-year-old history, and so there's nothing like going back in time, and so reminisce for me is the word that would describe how I would feel. I'm Roberto P. Laurel, President of the Lyceum of the Philippines University, Manila, Cavite, and Makati campuses. The original LPU was located here in Intramuros in 1952 by my grandfather, Jose P. Laurel. Lyceum, LPU, has been here for the past 67 years, and I believe it has contributed to nation building. We have a number of alumni who we are very proud of, who have accomplished great accomplishments, achievements in their private and public lives. I wish Intramuros would develop more, that we have more locators coming in. I know there are a lot of challenges, but I want to commend the Intramuros Administration, headed by the current Administrator, Attorney Asido, for such a focused development effort. It will take time, but progress is there and we can see it moving. And so my hope is that this will continue and that we will become a thriving community, not just alive during the day when we have so many people coming in, but even at night.
Ang mga binibenta ko pong pagkain na ulam, adobo, sinigang, kaldereta, pork chop, fried chicken, may mga gulay, pakbet, tsaka chop suey. Karamihan na kumakain sa akin, nagtatrabaho sa Mapua, mga empleyado. Tapos, estudyante rin ng Mapua, Lyceum, Manila High. Ayun po, nakakatulong ang tindahan po namin sa Intramuros, lalo na po ang sana may malaking bagay po sa mga estudyante at mga empleyado sa Intramuros na nagtatrabaho. Kasi pangmasa po ang presyo. 40 years na po ako nakatira sa Intramuros, naranasan na namin yung hirap, baha, sa amin, ang Intramuros, malaking bagay kasi dito nabuhay yung mga anak ko, dito ako nagpalaki ng mga anak ko, dito ko kinuha yung pampalaki ng mga anak ko, maaral. Kaya ang Intramuros, malaking bagay sa amin. Dito na rin nag-aaral ng mga anak ko ng high school, elementary sa Quiapo, Mabini, sa high school sa Manila High School, sa Intramuros. Ako po si Edna Apable. Merong isang karinderya sa Intramuros. Ang ginagawa ko po, namamalengke sa madaling araw, nagluluto, nagtitinda. Ang pangarap ko po sa Intramuros, sana huwag kaming mawala at habang buhay kami makapaghanap buhay sa Intramuros.
For me, Intramuros is a place of history. It is a cultural and creative hub, and it brings so much pride and joy to the 5th District as well. If I could describe Intramuros in one word, it's mesmerizing because walking along or walking around, it gives you a sense of history and makes you step into a whole new world that is so different from what you see outside the walls of Intramuros. My fondest memories of Intramuros, I would say, was when I was a little girl, because I also grew up here in the 5th District, and as a little girl, I would come to Intramuros with my parents. I would tag along. I would ride the Calesa. I would go around Intramuros, Fort Santiago, and I would remember also coming to Barbaras to eat with my dad. Hi, my name is Crystal Bagatsing. I am currently the Congresswoman of the 5th District of Manila, where Intramuros is located. One of my advocacies is about culture, preserving culture, and one of the things that I also do as a Congresswoman is make legislation, and I also have a constituency inside Intramuros. I think it's very important because when you say Metro Manila, there's really no place to go to for a cultural experience or for a historical experience. And there's really no other place like Intramuros. It's an original. There's nothing like it. If you want to have a feel of how it was to live during the Spanish times, this is where you go. I wish that everybody would work together to keep Intramuros the way it is, but make it better, preserve it better.
If you're looking at Intramuros from the perspective of history, it's one place where you could actually see the history of the Philippines as it unfolded. I see that Intramuros is an area which can embody the concept of reuse in urban planning. So just think of old structures being utilized in a modern sense. I think the challenge for us in IA is how can we recreate the former ambience so that people can relive history through Intramuros. And then that's where it becomes a site where we can educate people on the version of history according to the Filipinos. So I am Roberto Alabaro III, and currently I'm the Assistant Secretary for Tourism Development Planning. And it's fantastic to have an urban area, an old urban area, wherein the maybe in our generation we can see this transformed into a more developed society where poverty will no longer exist within the walls of Intramuros.
We start here in Fort Santiago, where we trace the prehistoric Philippines in the Kingdom of Ra Sulaiman.
He introduced me Manila and I fell in love with it. That's why we started Don't Skip Manila, to say, okay, since I fell in love with your stories, why not let's share it to others and let other people to fall in love with Manila.
Don't Skip Manila is a tour group that conducts several tours in Manila, especially here in Intramuros.
We are the one who tells the story of this place and what's the importance of it.
We wanted to somehow see Intramuros evolve into not just the old Manila, rather the Manila what is and the Manila of the present. I'm Andre, and this is Han, and we're from Don't Skip Manila. Intramuros is a good backdrop of being in a place where the destination speaks itself.
Intramuros is important because it is one destination, tourist destination in the city of Manila. And of course, this is a historical city. It is a city within a city because the schools are here, churches are here, institution, agencies, of course, the big churches here who always support the IA, and of course the training center who are here, the hospitals are within the city of Intramuros. My wish for Intramuros is orderly, clean city, and people should be in their perspective places. Like for instance, if hopefully in a couple of months or 3 months from now, the ISF will be relocated to resettlement site in Cavite or in Bulacan, because we want them to be in the respective homes. And of course, with that, Intramuros will rise again with this movement of informal settlers. We are not removing them from here because they are part of the community. They work here, they can come, they can live here, but they have to go to their respective permanent homes after resettlement. And of course, I wish also that Intramuros will be fully developed in terms of vacant lot, property. The owners will have this plan to develop their property here in Intramuros so that there will be no blighted areas anymore around. My name is Marieta V. Aliaga. I started working here in Intramuros in 1983, and this will be my 35th year in Intramuros Administration. As Chief of the Urban Planning, I am responsible for the monitoring of construction in and around Intramuros. We are also in charge of the processing of the Intramuros development clearance.
Grete? Jeg tænkte, du skulle
Undskyld,
dreje,
jeg skulle... Ja, hvad siger du?
du skulle dreje dit kamera, så du kommer mere centralt i billedet. Det er ligesom om, du er ved at falde ud i bunden.
Okay, sådan ser mit eget billede ikke ud, men hjælper det her?
Ja, bestemt. Så okay. Er der mere Grete og mindre cykel.
Okay. Tak skal du have. Sådan, så sidder det bedre.
Absolut.
Det er godt. Det snød lidt. Tak skal du have. I øvrigt kan jeg lige
Rancho, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our speakers from Denmark. Welcome to the first of a series of special episodes under the Intramuros Learning Sessions called Bikes for Cities for People. My name is Angelo Cruz from the Embassy, and I will be your moderator for this session. This particular session is under the program of the Intramuros Administration and co-organized by the Embassy of Denmark. The session will also be posted live via the Intramuros Administration Facebook page and the Danish Embassy's Facebook page, Denmark in the Philippines. Yes, before we begin, I would like to thank Attorney Gehl and his team from Intramuros, our speakers today, Gehl and Jesper Pørksen, our panelists, and our audience here from various parts of the Philippines for taking time out of your busy days to be here with us, learn from one another, and share knowledge which we can hopefully use in our daily professions. And also with us here today is the Danish ambassador to the Philippines, Grete Silasen, to say a few words about the importance of urban public spaces and what cycling really means to Danes and Denmark. And I now pass a virtual floor to Ambassador.
Thank you, Angelo. And I'm so glad to welcome everybody to this webinar. Biking is a lifestyle in Denmark, and it has been a great experience for me to see how biking is picking up here in the Philippines also. And at the Embassy, we are really very enthusiastic about this possibility to sustain that development, and we look forward to cooperating with many of you going forward also. There are so many I wish to thank for making this webinar possible, but let me start out by saying a heartfelt thanks to everybody who's with us today. Those of you who are listening in, I hear that we are well above 300. And also for those of you who have an active role today. And I would like to single out a few. Gehl Asido, already mentioned by Angelo. You are the Intramuros administrator, and we have had a good long-standing cooperation between the Embassy and Intramuros. And I'm really glad to see how you are seizing this moment where you are taking important steps towards an environment that is facilitating biking and also facilitating that the pedestrians can get around. I know that you recently had the Secretary for Tourism, Ms. Romelu Piat, doing a bike tour at Intramuros, and I hope that I can soon be able to do the same once circumstances allow it. Next, I would like to thank Jan Gehl. Good morning. God morgen to Copenhagen, Jan. I think the title of the webinar today and of the series relies heavily on the philosophy that has brought Jan to world fame, which is cities for people. Just try to listen to the concept, cities for people, and it sounds so obvious. Of course, our cities should be for us. But the truth was for many, many years that it was going in another direction, where it was becoming more and more the cities for cars, and then we were adapting to that situation. Jan has already given some lectures here in Manila about the broader concept of cities for people. But today we are narrowing it down to bikes for cities for people, because an important part of the cities for people is to make it easy for people to go around without having to get into a private car. So again, good morning to you, Jan. And also good morning to you, Jesper Pørksen, also chipping in from Copenhagen. You're the director of the Danish Cycling Tourism. I think many of you will know that Copenhagen is known as one of the most bike-friendly and most livable cities in the world. And part of what attracts many tourists to Denmark is the fact that it's so easy to get around. They are amazed with the infrastructure that we have for bikes and how everybody's on their bike we estimate that some 50% of people in Copenhagen go about their business every day on bike. As a Copenhagener, I can also say that I can see those tourists in the city image, because they very often stand out from the rest of us, because many of them obviously are not familiar with biking. And when they meet the culture of those of us that go there every day, they can sometimes be surprised with, for example, the speed at which we go, because for us, it's simply just a means of transportation. It's not necessarily an experience every day. It's just something that we do. But even so, tourism on bike is very, very important. And there's much more to it, as I'm sure that you will tell us about how you can go biking in the countryside. I did, when I was just a big kid myself, a biking trip with my family around the island of Bornholm. And I remember the pleasure, for example, of the abolished railway roads that then had been turned into lanes that could be used either for pedestrians or bikers. But we look forward to hear more of what you have to tell us. Then I'd like to say that at the Danish Embassy, we always take pride in promoting Danish ideas, Danish concepts, like we're doing with biking and Danish products. But today I'm actually also promoting a little bit a Philippine product. If you look at the screenshot that I have behind me, this is a Philippine BAM bike that was made specially for the Danish Embassy. We have a couple of them, and they are made especially for our needs. And I use it very often for official functions. So instead of coming in my car, if I can, I have to say sometimes distance and other things don't allow it. But then I arrive on my BAM bike, and we will hear more about BAM bikes today. As I said, biking is a lifestyle in Denmark. And I think one of the ways that you can really feel that is that we have several children's songs which are about biking. And then you know that it's really something that runs through our veins. And I think there is a particular children's song that Jan and Jesper could sing along with me if we wanted to, and be a beautiful trio. But it's called, I Am So Happy That I Have a Bike, because I can get easily around. And it's because when I have my bike, it's very, very easy for me. That's a very direct translation of it. But I think it says something about having it as a part of our culture. Today, we have an adult audience here with us, but a very important thing that you can do is to have this trickle down to everybody. If we get the youngsters, we know that. If we educate our youngsters, they will be the ones to carry the torch. There's nothing called trickle up. But anyway, let's have this go to the upper levels also, so that we can have the decision makers go with us. Because it's fantastic that we have civil society involved, but we need the decision makers also to really make everything happen. And we have decision makers with us today. So I'm very, very happy now to give the floor to our speakers. And I look forward to listening both to the presentations, to the panelists, and to the questions that will come. So welcome, and let's have a fun bike day.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind words, Ambassador. Before we go on with the first speaker, I'd just like to say a few reminders for the webinar. Please limit distractions. Keep your camera on. However, if you deem that your connection is slowing down, because of it, you may turn it off. This is for the panelists. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Be mindful of your physical background. Please be aware of the allotted time for you. Okay, so on to the next. The first speaker of the session is a co-founder of Gehl Architects in year 2000 and currently a senior advisor. He continues to research and develop the people-first approach through his books and lectures. Over the course of his career, he has focused on improving the quality of urban life by reorienting city design towards the pedestrian and the cyclist. He's known for turning Copenhagen into a pedestrian and a bike-friendly city during the 70s and the 80s, and continues to be a champion for people-centered cities and people-centered architecture. I would now pass the virtual floor to architect Jan Gehl.
Thank you very much, and I will share my screen. And we will get going. Here we are. Does it work down there? Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we can.
You can hear me and you can see the screen. So here we go. Thank you very much for inviting me for this. As you can see from the picture here, we also walk in Copenhagen and we also bike. And the climate is different from yours, but we'll come to that. And of course, we are going to talk about bike for cities, for people. But as usual, I will also lean very much to walk towards talking about livable cities for the 21st century, because we have a number of new agendas at this time in history. I have not had the chance myself to visit Intramuros in Manila, but I understand that it is the fabric is what we call Spanish colonial, with blocks, rather small blocks, and the whole Intramuros area is about 1 square kilometer, 1 by 1 kilometer. I think that I will dwell a little bit about this structure and this place. Also, I will refer to a number of other places. One of them is Copenhagen. It is 1.5 million, but the city center is very much 1 by 1 kilometer, 1 square kilometer. If we look at city centers in general, we have found that there is a very interesting, almost a constant, that nearly all city centers in cities around the world is more or less close to this size of 1 square kilometer. People define the city centers a bit differently. When I had the message from Amsterdam, they had actually shown half of Holland as being part of center of Amsterdam. But when you sort of go into it, we find this size 1 by 1 kilometer all over the place. And then why is all the cities in the old days 1 by 1 kilometer? That is actually as far as people can normally walk on one trip. So 1 by 1 kilometer is completely to be reached on foot and of course also on bicycle. It's an excellent size of a district, a city district. And I think that the first thing we can say is that Intramuros has absolutely the right size for a people-oriented city district. It's also interesting that here during the Corona times, we have seen a number of new ideas of how the cities should change. It is as if people have had time to think more about what we are doing. And from Paris, we have got this very interesting set of ideas that we should try to limit all the endless driving and traveling, commuting, and look towards having much more diverse city districts where most of the things you need in life can be found inside 15 minutes. These ideas have been developed in the Sorbonne University in Paris and has been promoted very much by the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. And thinking about it, all the old city centers in the world will be excellent 15-minute cities because it takes just 15 minutes to walk this 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer city. So Intramuros will be also a perfect 15 minutes city. Then I'll speculate about this, the fabric in Intramuros. I have not seen Intramuros. I've seen some pictures on the internet. And of course, I have seen Spanish colonial cities in a number of places. And I will always use this picture of how the cities looked in the old days, because in those days, all over the world, the cities looked like this. They were made by people, for people. The way to move around was mainly walking and maybe a little bit on horseback in those days. And interestingly, all of them look the same. If you are in Sweden or in Japan or in Canada or in Italy, you can find the same general fabric, the same dimensions. That will be the human dimension. I think that the Spanish colonial grid and that tradition of urban blocks, small urban blocks, which is characteristic of Spanish colonial, that is an excellent scale for a people-oriented city. It's a nice human scale. This is Cartagena in Colombia, which is one of the most beautiful Spanish colonial cities I have been in, very much for walking and very good also for not walking. That means it has got excellent spaces, squares, but also niches and sidewalks, whatever, where you can rest and do and enjoy the city, so you don't have to walk all the time. So a city district which is 1 square kilometer, that is actually a good human scale and is perfect for walking and bicycling. And what a glorious thing that you have exactly that fabric and that scale and that size in Intramuros, because that's a perfect starting point. It was always a city for walking, and I guess, I've not seen it, but I guess it's been invaded by motor cars, as most other city districts in the world has been. And what we've seen in one city after the other is that when you decide to have a better quality for people, it's very easy, because it's only to chase some of the cars out or all of the cars out and then clean up after the car culture and start to enjoy being human beings in these dense, good human scale city districts. I'll also point that we have today a number of recently developed new planning challenges in our cities. And actually, I think that every mayor in the world will be able to recognize this little list. I want a city which is livable. I want a city which is sustainable. And I want a city which invites for healthy lifestyle. And the city should also be good to be old in, and to be child, to be grown up, and to be old. All age groups should be included and have a good time in my city. That will be typical of a mayor at this time in history. It's very seldom that you find a mayor say, I want a city which has more and more cars, more and more pollution, more and more congestion. That's not really what we are aiming at today. The client we have for these cities, that is, of course, Homo sapiens. It's the same creature we have all over the world. They have found by gene analysis that actually it is the same human race you see in Africa, in Asia, in Greenland, in Europe, in America. All of us are Homo sapiens, and all of us have the same biological history. We are a walking animal. We are, what we can do as Homo sapiens is we can move linear with rather slowly, maximum 5 kilometers an hour. And all our senses are horizontal. We cannot see much up. We see a bit more down, and we see much more out to the sides. And because of our background of coming from the plains, where our senses were meant to control the route we were taking, we see a fantastic amount forward. We see just about movements out to the places, to the sides, where, of course, you should be aware if there was a tiger or something. And then we see something somewhat down, and because there could be snakes, and there could also be boulders and things we should not walk on. But up, we can hardly see very much because we are horizontal as an animal. And this animal has one fantastic thing, that is the greatest interest of Homo sapiens throughout his life is other people. From the very start of our life, we start to follow from the little baby bed. The moment the little one can raise, they start to look at what is happening, and when they can climb out of the bed, they start to follow the grown-ups to see. And throughout the life, and also in the old people's home, you can see people sitting where there's most activity to be entertained by the most interesting thing in our lives, which are other people. So meeting other people is a very important thing. And the very great day in history of mankind is the day when you can stand up and start to walk. That's such an important day that the mother would rush to the telephone and telephone to grandmother, and the mother will yell, "She can walk, she can walk." That's a great day. Then life can begin for a walking animal. That is who we are in Denmark and in Philippines. Same creature, same senses, same abilities, walking animal. In this good city of the 21st century, it is, as it has always been, important to create public spaces where people can meet, where people can walk and meet, and where we can actually just, the simplest way of contact between people is just seeing them and hearing them. And we love it very, very much. We have a saying from an old Icelandic saga, which is almost 1,000 years old, where this man will say, "Man is man's greatest joy," which is exactly what it is. We made many, many surveys, and always we found that the greatest attraction in any city are not the buildings and the monuments, but that is the other people. That is the opportunity, the ability to meet other people, to see them, and to just take in the society you are part of. You can see how important life is in cities. You can see that every time an architect hands in a project, it will normally be crawling with happy people, because happy people in a setting is a sign it's a good place. You know that if it was not a good place, everybody would go home. But if it is a good place, people will come out and start to enjoy, which you can see on all the projects. It could be a very crummy project, but the architect will try to hide that it's a crummy project by putting much life between the buildings in his drawings. Of course, we call this people washing, but it shows that people and life is very important as a factor of attractivity. Increasingly, we have become worldwide aware of the climate challenge, that we have to reduce our outlet of CO2 quite substantially. We have to change our ways so that we use much less resources and actually find better ways. Of course, if you can reduce transportation and commuting, that is a very good thing. But anyway, the more we walk and bicycle, the better this is for the climate. And also we can realize that if people are to find other ways of moving about than the private car, then public transport will have an increasing importance. And then a good public realm is very important for good public transportation, because you should be able to walk in dignity and in safety to and from the public transportation. Then the doctors tell us now that we are very much on the road to a complete new pandemic or sickness worldwide. That is what the doctors called the sitting syndrome. It is, of course, the worst place is not United States, that's actually Saudi Arabia, but we can see it especially clearly in the United States, where more than a third of the population are actually overweight, seriously overweight. And the doctors tell us that much of this comes from the fact that for 50 years we have built more and more so that you are invited to sit as much as possible. If in a typical American suburb, you sit in the morning, you sit in the car, you sit at your workplace, you sit in the car and you sit and watch television, whatever. You sit and sit and sit. And the doctors say, no way, you shall move more and you shall sit less. And you, city planners, shall do whatever you can to invite people to walk and to bicycle. We cannot rely on people taking the escalator to the fitness center and sitting for 2-3 hours in a rowing machine. It is much better if we organize our cities so that walking and bicycling is a natural part of the daily life. Also, I have been told I'm so happy to have a senior doctor as my daughter, and she tells me very much that if you have 1 hour a day or moderate exercise, you can expect a much better quality of life, especially in the old days. Actually, you can expect to live several years longer, and you will have a much better quality of life, and you will be there will be much less health problems with you. You will need less pills, and you will be much cheaper for the health system if you move every day in your life. And that is why World Health Organization actually say to us planners, or actually to the community in the world, introduce transport policies that promote active and safe methods of traveling, such as walking and bicycling. Intramuros is a perfect place to do this. Also, in our society, we can see an increasing number of elderly people. In many societies, it's more than 20% of people now who are retired. And we know these people are told by the doctors, you should do 10,000 steps a day to keep the doctors away. You should be active, you should move around. So you should have wonderful public spaces and parks and whatever, so that you can move also when you are old. And generally, a city which is good for people is also a very good city to be old in. And actually, it's also a very good city to be a child in. Actually, it's a better city for everyone. So if we look at this, if you look after pedestrians and bicyclists, if you look carefully after this in city planning, you will efficiently address all these issues. You will have a more livable city, a more sustainable city, a more healthy city, and a good city to be child and to be old. Going back to Intramuros, it is, as far as I can understand, a perfect place for putting people first in city planning. It has the perfect size. It's a very good human scale. It has a perfect city fabric, and it has an architecture which actually is quite people friendly. So it's just to clean up, and you will have a perfect city for people in such a place. Also, I should say that there is, I'll tell a little bit about walking. And the main thing here is there's much more to walking than walking. Walking is not only about getting from A to B. And actually, a good city is not necessarily a city where you can walk. Any city can have many people walking. But you can always tell a good city that they have many people who have stopped walking and starting to sit down, started to enjoy. In a city like Rome, you can see many people walking, but you can see even more people who have stopped walking, and you have seen all these places which are enjoyable, which are so tempting and inviting that you cannot resist sitting down and starting to enjoy. So actually, it's not the walking which is really interesting. It is the non-walking. It is the people who stopped and the people who start to enjoy in a city. That is the true sign of a good city. And something about bicycling. We have actually two types of bicycling. We have Sunday bicycling and Monday bicycling. There is a recreational bicycling where you go out in the countryside or you go around on Sundays, and you can see here this 3 generations starts on a Copenhagen bike path to go out to do something recreational. But then we have what is very important. We have the Monday biking and the weekday biking. That is going to work. That is going to where you have to do something. And that is the everyday bicycling. This, of course, is far more important than the Sunday biking. Every city can have some recreational routes where you can go on Sunday, or you can have, as they have in South America, very widespread, the Sunday streets where they close the streets on Sundays, ciclovia is called, where everybody can go out, walk and bike on the Sundays, because in the Sundays, the cars are not using the streets very much, so they can be allocated to people exercising, to bicycling, whatever, ciclovia. But Monday biking, that's the important thing. We also have various types of bicycling. In Copenhagen, we use very much the bicycling for everything, for small little errands and also for serious commuting. And we will normally say that it's not at all unfamiliar to find people who do 15 kilometers to and from their place of work on the bicycle. But most of the people who are commuting to work on bicycles, they will be 5 to 10 kilometer distances they will do every day. And that is a special thing, and that's very good for our climate, which is a little bit chilly. So if you bike to work, you can keep warm by the biking. The other type of biking I found when we were asked to do a bicycle infrastructure in various districts in Singapore, that in Singapore, they don't look at the bicycle as something where you do commuting. They look at it as something which will increase the radius of the pedestrians. They say that bicyclists, they are fast pedestrians and they can go a bit longer. Then you can have a little bit bigger districts, because with a bicycling, you can do a bigger distance. And they are speaking about short distances, 1-2 kilometers, to go down to the station, go down to the doctor, go down to the shops. And they talk about pedaling, where you move not too fast, because it's very hot in Singapore. And if you do go fast, you are sweat all over, and it's not at all pleasant. But pedaling is very nice in Singapore, and that may also be what you will see in Intramuros. That's not about commuting really, more about pedaling, more the Singapore way of bicycling. In Denmark, of course, everybody bikes. My daughter and her kids are biking. The Crown Princess and her kids are bicycling. The coming king is on the bike there. And you can see in the kindergarten that you start early in Denmark, training the kids in the kindergarten to move safely in the traffic. And when you get old, it's never too late to bike. We have this organization, Bicycling Without Age, where they believe that it's a human right to have wind in your hair. And they invite people from old people's home to be taken around on bicycles in their old neighborhoods, and they love it. So what not to do, really not to do in the 21st century is Dubai. That is modernistic planning and complete motorization and a very, very low priority to people. This guy is still standing on the sidewalk dreaming of getting across. He'll never make it. The other extreme will be Venice, which is a city, actually a 15-minute city, made for walking and still today is completely for walking. There are no cars in Venice. That is maybe being a little bit drastic. In Copenhagen, actually, we have a model where we have cars and we have pedestrians and we have bicycles, and we aim at having some balance and having a balance where there are more space for putting people first. And people first in city planning is very recommendable, and there are 4 reasons. It's the simplest and cheapest you can do. There are no infrastructure in the world which is cheaper than the infrastructure for bicyclists and pedestrians. And it is a much better city for all generations and for all social groups, for everyone, from the smallest child to the oldest inhabitant. And then it is so cheap and easy to do that it can be used in all parts of the world, regardless of the economy of that particular place. And finally, you can start tomorrow to make a more people-oriented city. That was my message for this morning.
Oh, thank you so much, Jan Gehl, for the very insightful presentation. And indeed, bikes are the cheapest way to get around. And the most simple, I would say. Yeah, quality public spaces go very much hand in hand with active mobility, and people really need safe spaces to connect with themselves and their communities. And COVID even showed us what cities can potentially be with more open and breathable spaces for walking and cycling. So thank you so much, Jan. We have, well, now that Jan has ended early, we have about 24 minutes for the panel discussion. I will call each and every one of you so you can ask questions, share insights, or even initiatives related to the subject matter. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to present our panel discussants. First one is Ms. Christine Manizares. If you could show yourself through the video. She is the Department of Tourism Regional Director, OIC, for Western Visayas. Hello, Christine. For the second panelist, we have Mr. J. Teodoro. He is the Chief Operations Officer of the Fort Bonifacio Development Corporation. Good afternoon, Jay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yep. For the third, we have Dasha Uy, Health Program Officer of the Department of Health on behalf of Dr. Beverly Po. Hi, Dasha.
Everyone, good afternoon.
And for the fourth, we have Mr. Robert C. of, he's the Pasig Transport Chief of the City of Pasig. Hello, Robert.
Hi, good afternoon. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can start with Ms. Christine Manizales of the DOT Western Visayas.
Yes, thank you, Angelo. Good afternoon to all and good morning over there. Architect Gehl. Thank you to the Royal Danish Embassy Manila. Ambassador, thank you very much. And Intramuros Administration, Admin Gehl, for inviting the Department of Tourism Region 6 in this interesting session. And happy anniversary for the 75 years of diplomatic relations between Denmark and the Philippines. It was such a great presentation, Architect Gehl. The fusion of psychology and architecture. You emphasize the relationship of physical environment and human well-being anchored on 4 components, that is to be lively, safe, sustainable, and healthy. Our region, which is Western Visayas, is composed of 6 provinces, including Aklan, where Boracay is, Antique, which is famous for its hablon, that is a local weed, Capiz, which is the seafood capital of the Philippines, Iloilo as the MICE center and bi-capital of the country. We also have Guimaras for its sweetest mangoes, and the virtual Mangahan Festival, or the Mango Festival, is still ongoing. And lastly, Negros Occidental as the land of sweet surprises. And the region has a total of 16 cities, including 2 highly urbanized cities, the city of Bacolod and the city of Iloilo. And we are fortunate to have 2 ASEAN Clean Tourist City awardees in Western Visayas, and these are Iloilo City and the city of San Carlos in Negros Occidental. The cities of San Carlos and Iloilo highlight initiatives to beautify their public areas, improve the environment and sanitation, enhance urban spaces, and promote both their man-made and natural attractions. It was also interesting earlier in your presentation that spaces are reclaimed for the community in order for them to better explore the city, its culture, and of course, its history. And to highlight, Iloilo City has also been recognized for its road sharing initiatives and its protected bike lanes. And also, Architect Gehl, thank you for your guidance. I hope we can further promote accessible or barrier-free tourism in our region, wherein we can cater to the needs of the community, including people with physical limitations, senior citizens, and of course, children. I am just curious if your company is offering master classes for our private and public stakeholders on how to reorient our spaces to become equitable, healthy, and sustainable. And definitely the best place to live is the best place to visit and the best place for our investors to invest in. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christine, for the very informational and insightful comment on what the status is in Western Visayas. Any comments to that, Jan?
I think that the last remark was very important, that a good city for people is also a city worth visiting. So you should always aim, not for the tourist, but aim for yourself, make a fantastic place, and people would love to come and visit you. So I think that's a very interesting and very correct analysis of the situation. So you get more for your money than just a catering for the tourists.
Thank you, Architect Gehl.
And anyway, what I talked about is very cheap. That's very important, that this infrastructure for people costs nothing compared to infrastructure for buses and rapid buses and metro and light rail, and not to talk about the infrastructure for motor cars. All of this is very expensive, but it is very inexpensive to have infrastructure for people. And there's one interesting thing which I did not mention. We found in Copenhagen that whenever a guy who takes his bicycle and go 1 kilometer, the society gains 75 cents US dollars. And whenever he takes the car and do the same kilometer, society loses 17 cents, because when you take all the expenses with motor cars and put them together, actually society is not gaining by having people going by car. They actually are paying to it. So it's also much cheaper for society if people move themselves.
Thank you very much, Jan, and I can vouch for what you mentioned about the costs. When I started by commuting to the embassy, I saved, I believe, around 8,600 pesos every month. That's about 1,300 kroner, and you can easily spend that for your favorites, such as food, after a nice bike ride from the office. Yeah, so let's move on to Mr. J. Teodoro, Chief Operations Officer of FBDC.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Well, perhaps what I can share with this panel is my experience in when we were developing BGC, and also from the point of view of private developers, like FBDC. Jan Gehl talked about the importance of open spaces, as an amenity for people, to make people go around, encourage them to walk. The way we really value open spaces in all the developments that we develop. In fact, in BGC, more than a third of the entire development is allocated for open spaces, and we don't see this as just an amenity for the public. We see this as a main source of value for developers like us. In fact, I would assume, like right now, the highest land values in BGC would be the property surrounding Bonifacio High Street, which is our 1 kilometer retail promenade. So I guess, from a developer point of view, it's not just providing open spaces, but use those open spaces to create value. So it benefits both the developer, the private companies, as well as the people and the community that lives in the city.
Thank you so much, Jay. Any thoughts on that, Jan?
Yeah, there has been made many surveys about what good public space means for economy. When they changed, which I was part of, when they changed, or we changed, Times Square, New York, from a big traffic crossing to a much more people-oriented place, there was much worry that the business in the district of Times Square would suffer from having less cars and more people. But they found that the business was thriving enormously after this change. We have also from Copenhagen, we have many figures that if you make a good square, you can see all the dwellings and all the buildings and whatever real estate around the square will go up in price. And that means that they will have more value. And you write in the advertisements, it is right next to this square. You can see this park, or you can see this square from your windows. That gives an extra boost to the economy. So we have enormous many data about that. It is very good business to look after people in city planning.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good, most especially in BGC where there are parks. Also, I can see a lot of people going to parks, having their lunch there, having their quiet time, possibly thinking of what to do next in the office. But generally, it's a quiet time. They look very satisfied with the way they're eating their lunch alone. And that really helps a lot in people's state of well-being. And that's one thing I think is very important during this pandemic, is to heighten up people's general well-being. Thank you very much, Jan and Jay. Now we move on to Ms. Dasha Uy from the Department of Department of Health.
Hi, Angelo. Thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my screen and have a few slides to show everybody.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. When Architect Gehl said earlier, about the 15-kilometer cycling average of the Dutch, I was very pleasantly surprised. I biked to work for the first time today, and my work is 15 kilometers away from my house. We made it safely.
Oh, wow.
I have my helmet here. So I think it's really possible in the Philippines now to really make it, especially in Metro Manila, to make it a bike-friendly city. And I think we're already starting. When we were biking around earlier, there was quite an extensive set of lanes. No? Of course, we have to improve, but still, it's starting now. So for us in the Department of Health, we are really focused on two things when it comes to people-centered cities, no? And active transport. We're concerned mostly with road safety and with physical health, so physical activity as well. I just want to show some statistics before we begin. So in the Philippines, road crashes are the most common cause of injury to Filipinos, and we see that increasing with an increasing amount of motor vehicle usage as well, no? And ownership increasing as well. And our vulnerable road users are the ones who are most vulnerable to accidents, of course. So a lot of deaths for children and young adults, for women as well. Motorists are likelier to drive closer to female cyclists, and also low-income people as well, who don't necessarily have access to private vehicles, no? So they rely on either bicycles or public transport. And we also see, syempre, our cyclists and pedestrians are also the most vulnerable to road crashes. So in road crashes involving cyclists result in injury or death almost 70% of the time here in the Philippines, and pedestrians actually make up 44%, almost half, no, of all fatalities during our road crashes. So we want to bring that down. We want to make sure that our cities are healthy and livable and navigable by bike or by walking. And we see that one good way to make this happen is through making active transport possible. So we see that injuries and deaths among our cyclists and pedestrians decrease as active transport use increases. And that's because of three reasons. No? First, decongested roads. The more people rely more on bikes rather than motor vehicle users, no? The less likely that they are to get into a severe accident between cars, for example, and the more likely that more essential motor vehicle usage is prioritized. So we would have more space for our ambulances, we would have more space for our big delivery trucks, and also people would get around actually more efficiently as well. We do see that happening as well. Second, safety in numbers, because more cyclists are more visible on the road. Motorists tend to be more cautious, no? So as not to crash into our cyclists as well. And lastly, the more, it's demand generation. So the more we see cyclists on the road, the more government is mandated, I guess, or the more that we can demand from our government to create dedicated and protected bicycle lanes as well, especially to protect our beginner cyclists, such as myself. I started this year from high-speed traffic as well. And we see a host of other benefits, when it comes to switching to active transport. So again, as we said earlier, we in the DOH are really concerned with health, and we do see a high number of non-communicable diseases. So hypertension, diabetes, some of the most common among Filipinos. These can be prevented through active transport or any form of physical activity, even just for 30 minutes a day. So this morning, I had my fix for already 2 days. It took me an hour to get to work. And then jumping off from Sir Riel's point about cities being good for children and seniors, we also see that cycling is great for vulnerable sectors as well. So we see for low-income people, for minorities, for women, and their health. So our research actually shows that they benefit more from the affordability of cycling and the opportunities that cycling opens up for them to access our public and essential services. So our research actually shows that their health improves even more than that of the general public. And we see that there's actually demand for active transport reform. This is something that this is an SWS survey that we did last year, in November last year, and we saw that it is possible for my city and municipality to become a great place for walking and cycling. There was a very strong net agreement, and the same for roads in Philippine cities and municipalities will be better off if public transport, bicycles, and pedestrians are given priority over private vehicles. So when Architect Gehl said putting people first, that's something that we really resonate with. It's about time that we listen to people when they talk about wanting to prioritize bicycles, bicycles and public transport versus private cars, no, which 90% of our population do not have access to. So I just wanted to share a couple of case studies. We did provide assistance to the municipality of Cordova in Cebu. No? So this is right beside Cebu City, which is one of our major metropolitan areas. We provided them with a 2.85 million peso sub-allotment grant, and they launched a 1.5 kilometer bike lane with that. And because they saw that the number of bicycle users increased by 326%, no, they decided to start planning another 19.7 kilometers of bicycle lanes. This is to be developed between 2021 and 2025. And also, this is actually from Anton, who will be speaking later. Pasig City's Amang Rodriguez bicycle lane, it's 3.4 kilometers of permanent bicycle lanes. And then at peak hours, we saw there are actually more bicycles than private cars using the road. No? And more bicycles than predicted by even our international standards for the widest two-way bicycle lane. So that just goes to show that there's really demand for active transport, and there's really, if you build it, people will come. So that's what we wanted to show here. It's not difficult to make our cities healthy. And so this is we just wanted to share one of our tools for helping our local government units roll out their own bicycle lanes. So we create health promotion playbooks, and one of our playbooks is on active transport. And it's a ready-to-use tool for the local government units to promote bicycle use and active transport in the new normal through the creation of protected bicycle lanes and protected pedestrian walkways. So all of the tools are there, ready to use. An evidence brief, our template ordinance, our resource requirements so that we know how much to budget per kilometer of bicycle lanes, capacity building for our active mobility committee or bicycle committee, an implementation checklist, a monitoring tool, communication materials as well to improve uptake or use of our bicycle lanes, and then frequently asked questions. So you can actually download the playbook at the link on your screen now. That's bit.ly/HPB_2021 playbooks. It's 1 out of 8 of our playbooks, all targeting different things as well. So we have some on active transport, on healthy diets, on hand washing, etc. And we will continue to work with DOTR, DILG, and DPWH in the Interagency Technical Working Group to roll out bike lanes in our major metropolitan area. So you'll see bike lanes starting to pop up in Metro Manila, in Cebu, and in Davao as well. And we're hoping to expand that work with regard to road safety and human-centered spaces. So lastly, this is my last slide, I think. I just wanted to emphasize that road reform to promote active transport involves more than just installing protected bicycle lanes. Although that is a great help naman. We want to also look at it more holistically. So reducing motor vehicle usage, encouraging the use of public transport, by calming traffic, improving design standards, and then improving, syempre, our response also to road crashes. So it's really a host of different reforms in order to make our cities, again, more people-centered and more livable for every Filipino. I think that's my last slide. So thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for sharing also. I hope you learned something from my short sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dasha. Yes, and congrats on the 15-kilometer ride to work. That's no joke. Yeah, any comments to that, Jan?
I think it was a very, very interesting presentation, and I could recognize many of the findings. They are worldwide found, this relationship that it's the pedestrians and bicycles who are hurt in traffic, and there's very good economy in making better conditions. There was one figure I focused on. You mentioned that 90% of the households of the people have no access to cars. This is a very important information. I could relate to the city of Bogota in Colombia, where they have this mayor, Enrique Peñalosa, who they were in the same situation. 80% of the people in Bogota had no access to cars. And then he said that to have a better economy in the city, we shall make the poor people more mobile. And we can do that by making better sidewalks, better conditions for walking, we can have bicycle lanes, and then we must have a very fast and efficient transportation, bus rapid system, so that the poor people can go around and seek the work in the city where work is to be found, instead of being very confined to their poor area. So he had a very active policy of promoting walking, bicycling, and good, quite quick and cheap public transportation. So people should not spend half the day in old rattling buses going around in the city. And he saw this as a very important way of improving the economy of the city. All these other figures about safety, I can recognize all of them from our own society. And I can tell you that here in Copenhagen, we normally say that when you are 4 or 5 years old, you can go on bicycle with your parents on protected bike lanes. And I know from my own grandchildren, when they are 12, they are allowed to go by bicycle all over the city because it is considered safe. The more bicyclists you have and the more culture of bicycle you have, the safer it becomes. And now it's safe for a 12-year-old to go from one end of the city to the other, to go to sports or to go to activities or friends, whatever, which of course is a valuable, wonderful freedom for the young people. So I could recognize many of these items you mentioned in your excellent talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Architect.
Thank you so much, Jan. Yeah, and also to mention, maybe it would be good for the Philippines to study. It could be through the Department of Health if there would be already an average in the next coming years of lesser sick days, which will also be a good indicator for employers to observe and from the bike commuters. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Dasha and Jan. We would now move forward to Mr. Robert C. of the City of Pasig Transport Chief. Are you here with us, Anton? Yep.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to hear you.
Hi.
But it's
yeah. You can hear me now. All right. Excellent.
Yes. Yes.
Well. Anyway. Yes. Angelo, Jan, Dasha, Kim, Jay, and everyone. Thank you so much. It's always great to be here at one of these events where you can talk about cycling and how to make a better city for everybody. I think one thing which I really want everyone to realize, and I think I realized in this webinar, we've got lots of our colleagues working in cities all over the Philippines, not just in Metro Manila, but in other parts of the Philippines, like the Visayas and in Mindanao. And one thing which I always want people to recognize, I think Jan was getting at this earlier, is that maybe in other countries, especially when you talk about making countries in the West more cities for people, you're talking about countries with higher levels of car ownership. I think Dasha already got at this. Jan also recognized in the Philippines, majority of the population does not have access to motor vehicles, and it will never be a sustainable goal to aspire to majority motor vehicle access in the Philippines. I think one thing which I always try to tell people is that Pasig City is already a cycling city, and so is most of Metro Manila. Once you actually start to count cyclists, you realize that it's never that they were so few as to be negligible. It's just that historically in our policy, we've treated them so insignificantly as to make them invisible to us in our policy and in our decision-making processes. But once you actually start to care about people, once you start to care about mobility at the human scale of walking and cycling, and once you start to pay attention by counting them and by giving them dignity in your planning process, then you start to realize that this is the kind of mobility that most people in the Philippines actually aspire for, and which the future generation actually wants to care about and dream of when it comes to making their city more better for not just for themselves but also for their children. I think Dasha briefly shared some of our statistics in Pasig, and when you notice the peak hour bicycle volumes along some of the streets where we have protected bike lanes, actually it already surpasses the thresholds in the Dutch Crow manual, for instance, for the highest level of protected two-way bicycle infrastructure. So actually, when you think about it, in many parts of the Philippines we already have bicycle volumes that would qualify to be called bicycle superhighways even. We just have historically ignored it. So I think maybe, I don't want to take any more time away from the excellent speakers we have today, but I just want everyone to realize and to take away from my part that we already live in cycling cities. We already live in human-centered cities. We just need to count them, and we just need to give people dignity. Of course, I'd love to hear what the great Gehl has to say about this. You've inspired many urbanists around the world, including myself. Thank you very much for giving time today.
Thank you so much, Robert. Any comments to that, Jan?
I think it was very important that you mentioned the importance of having data about pedestrians and bicycles. The secret behind Copenhagen is that Copenhagen was the first city in the world who started to have just as many data about people walking and the use of public space by people as they have about the traffic. Normally, all cities in the world has a traffic department which look after the traffic and try to make it as good for the cars as possible. And no city in the world has a department for public space and walking. And generally, no city have any data about walking and public life. And some also have no data about bicycling. And the first thing to get these things recognized and planned for is to have data. Mayor in New York, Michael Bloomberg, he started a talk recently by saying, in America, in God we trust, but now bring me the data. I worked for Michael Bloomberg in the United States, and when we were changing Times Square, they wanted data. And we found that 90% of the people on Times Square, they were pedestrians, and they were on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk was 10% of the space. In 90% of the space, there were cars where there were 10% of the people. And then it was just to say that if there are more people walking than in cars, give them more space. And that is what they were doing. And it's very, very efficient to have data to make the pedestrians and the bicyclists visible in the political discussion, because generally they have a very low status in the data collection. Get the data and trust God.
Thank you so much for that, Jan. Just for sake of the audience, there will be a Q&A later towards the end of the program. And for the references earlier by Dasha, I'd just like to inform you that this webinar is recorded and will be posted on the YouTube page of the Intramuros Administration. And just mentioning what Anton already said, that Pasig is already a cycling city, and that mentality will for sure put us in a progressive direction towards a more bike-friendly city where everyone can acknowledge their own personal choice of transportation and respect each other on that level. So thank you to our panelists for the Jan Gehl part. I hope you will be here with us for the next speaker. And now is the time to introduce the next speaker. He has been the director of the Danish cycling tourism since the organization started operating in 2015. It is a non-profit association of public and private partners The main purpose is to develop cycling tourism in Denmark, executing national and international projects dealing with all aspects of cycling tourism development, from infrastructure to service development and development of information tools, PR, and campaigns. So everyone, I now pass the virtual floor to Mr. Jesper Pørksen.
Thank you very much, Angelo. I hope everyone can hear me. I am, like Jan, situated in Copenhagen, far away from all of you. I will share my screen with you. Should be coming up now. And before I start my presentation, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be a presenter in this session. I'm very both proud and humble being in the same program as Jan Gehl, whom I have had the pleasure of listening to more than once, and it's always very inspiring, and it's never boring listening to Jan. He always has a new thought, and his philosophy is still very relevant also in a country like Denmark, where we also see an increase in the use of the car, in not only in the cities but in the whole country. I have never been to the Philippines, I must say, and I have also only very limited knowledge of your country. But I hope that some of the points I will give in my presentation have a general character, so that you also can use it in your country, as different it may be from where I come from. First, a few words about my organization. It's called Danish Cycling Tourism. We are still a very young organization, only founded 6.5 years ago. We are a professional association, or we like to call ourselves a professional organization. We have municipalities, tourism destinations, and also some private companies as members. And our purpose is to develop, coordinate, and create growth in the cycling tourism sector in Denmark. We're also the Eurovelo Coordination Center for Denmark. The Eurovelo, that's a European cooperation on a European network of bicycle routes. I think there are 18 of them in total, covering more than 70,000 kilometers throughout Europe. And we have 4 of these European routes going through Denmark. So my presentation will focus on the Danish market, but also include some aspects from the European bicycle tourism market. Here's just some of our members. They won't say a lot to you. Danish municipalities, Danish tourist destinations, and some private companies. We're very happy about the support they give us, and happy about the cooperation, the close cooperation with all of them, because it's developing a good cycling country, developing a good cycling tourism country. That's really a matter of cooperation between different actors, public and private. I guess that's the same situation in every country. Just to show you where we are on the map, up north west to you. Denmark also a country surrounded by water, or most of it is, but we are very few. We are only 6 million, and I read that you are more than 100 million people. The city of Metro Manila is, I think, the population is 4 times the Danish population. So it's very, very different circumstances. On the the map of Denmark, it's actually a cycling map, because you can see it's not motorways showing on the map, it's actually bicycle routes, and you can see that we have Copenhagen in the far east of the map, where we have quite a dense network of cycling routes. My focus of today is talk a bit about the opportunities within and with cycle tourism, and give some more practical advice on how to develop cycling tourism. But first of all, who is a cycle tourist? Something we spend a lot of time discussing and trying to define. What is actually a cycle tourist? And when are you a cycle tourist? Just some impressions. The first one is that's me. 20 years ago, cycling around Scotland. I would say I was a very typical cycle tourist at that at that moment. That was how most cycle tourists look like. The bike packed with luggage, going from one campsite to the other. But the picture has changed a bit over the years. Here's a family on tour in Denmark. Here are some cyclists crossing a bridge in Copenhagen. We have a mountain biker in the surroundings of Copenhagen here. We also he could very well be a cycling tourist if he was not a local guy doing mountain biking. Two couples on the tour close to the city of Aarhus, the second biggest city. More a family tour, or at least younger children on a tour. Some mountain bikers again, and some international tourists going on a long tour through Denmark, and finally, say some road bikers. And would we include them as cycle tourists? Not necessarily, but they could very well be cycle tourists if they would come from Germany, let's say, to Denmark with the purpose of doing some road bike tours in Denmark. Then they would also be considered as a cycle tourist. So just to say that the picture has broadened a lot. We include very many different types of cyclists when we talk about cycling tourism. It can be everything from a long tour going from place to place to the Sunday tour, as Jan mentioned. If you are already a tourist in Denmark and you would like to see the city on a bike, then you're also considered a cycling tourist on that Sunday. The picture has changed a bit, at least in Denmark. 25 years ago, most of the cycle tourists, they were going from A to B, going on a tour. And the minority was staying in the same place and doing round tours. If we fast forward to today, we have that it's less than every fifth tourist who are considered as a classical tourist. Most of the cycle tourists in Denmark, they are staying in a holiday house, staying in a campsite, staying in a hotel in the city, and they are doing day tours without much luggage. They can still cover a long distance, but it's a different kind of cyclist than we used to see. If we look at some of the trends in cycling tourism over the past 20-30 years, we have sort of investigated and we see these 5 trends. A development from the self-organized tour, where you plan everything yourself, to more organized products. It can be tour operators, it can be bike rental shops that offer guided tours, but it's not like everything is organized today, but there's a trend toward more organized products. Then we also see another trend that we have maybe younger people in the past to cycling for all ages. Jan showed you the elderly people going around in these rickshaw bikes, but also the e-bike has brought a large group of elderly people maybe back on bikes, because it's now more easy to go on a bike tour because you have the support of the motor. Then we have the classical cycle holidays. When I was in Scotland, I only biked. I biked all day, and then I ate and slept, and then I did the same the day after. Today we still have that, but today we see a large group of people doing holidays and have cycling as an activity. And it can very well be a city holiday with cycling as an activity. We'll come back to that later. Also a trend, cycling on the road. Back when I was a child, we didn't have as many cycle lanes as we have today, so we used the road. And today we have more dedicated cycle infrastructure, and we also demand more cycle infrastructure when we cycle. That is an increasing problem in the countryside in Denmark, because the infrastructure is typically in the cities. The last trend, going from a local market to global competition. We have cycling tourists. Not last year, but usually in Denmark we have cycling tourists coming from all over the world to Denmark, and we compete with Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, Spain. So there's also a global competition about cycle tourists. Looking a bit at the European market, in 2012 there was a large study on the European cycling tourism market, and a figure was calculated, the yearly turnaround, yearly turnover for related to cycling tourism, 44 billion euros, and a figure comparable with the cruise industry in Europe before COVID-19. And it's of course interesting to see what is the numbers in the future. We have seen since 2012 cycling tourism has only increased, and the cruise industry has had a big downfall last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In Europe, the German market is the most important market. The Germans, they are by far the biggest cycling tourism market. Here you can see the development over the past 20 years in Germany. The figure is showing the Germans who have been on a 3-day cycle tour, more than 3-day cycle tour. A steady increase until last year, the COVID impact, but in the same year, the excursions, the day excursion had seen a large increase in Germany, and it's the same picture in many other European markets. That last year we went out in our own countries, and we did it very often either on foot or on a bike. A few words about the profile of a cycle tourist. These findings, they are quite old. They are from this European report from 2012. The average age, the middle age, 45-55. Most cycle tourists were male, but in the day excursions it's more equal. quite high education level. Most people cycle in pairs, and the household income, I think, a bit above average. I think we have also seen over the past 10 years also development here. I talked a bit about the age groups before. I think we now see a more, it could be that the average age is still around this middle age group, but we see both very young people going on bicycle tours, and we see also an increasing number of elderly people going on bicycle tours. So there's also development there that the cycle tour is for everyone. Looking a bit at the Danish market, some key points from the Danish market. It's growing. Have a yearly increase in cycling tourists if we don't consider last year as a very special year. 60% of the cycle tourists are international tourists in Denmark, and 40%, that's the largest group, are from Germany. There are just as many German tourists. There's just as many German cycling tourists in Denmark as there are Danish cycling tourists. The international cycling tourists, they prefer to stay in holiday houses. That's the largest, say, accommodation facility in Denmark. Are these? It's not always small houses, but smaller houses along the coast of Denmark. I think that's more than 15 million overnight stays in these houses per year. They are very popular, especially among the German tourists. And the Danish cycle tourists, they prefer camping, to stay on the campsites. This is the development over the past 10-15 years. The numbers are measured every third year. That's why we have 2008, 2011, 14 and 17. And you can see we have had an increase from a bit over 1 million cycling tourists in 2008 to 1.7 million cycling tourists in 2017. It's actually every fifth tourist in Denmark is considered a cycling tourist. That means that they have cycling as a very important motive for choosing Denmark as a destination of their holiday. Last year was special. Borders closed. We didn't see many international tourists in Denmark last year, but we have some automatic counters placed on some of the national routes in Denmark. And we were very curious, how would the figures be compared to 2019? And as you can see, on nearly every route, we have had an increase in cyclists along these counterposts. Quite big increase on some of the routes, even without, say, with nearly zero international tourists in Denmark. That was quite interesting to see, and it could be explained by the Danes. They have, in a large scale, they went out on bicycles to explore their own country. The economic benefits of cycling tourism. One thing is the turnover. I mentioned the European figure of 44 billion euros per year. That's a lot of jobs connected to cycling tourism. It's a bit of a struggle to calculate the number because we have a broad definition of cycling tourists. It was maybe easy in the old days, when I was doing my tour in Scotland, I was 100% cycle tourist. But today we have cycle tourists. They are maybe 30% cycle tourists during the holiday. and they are 20% walking tourists, and then they are 10% city tourists, and then it's difficult to calculate the turnover. But it is a very important factor in the turnover. Also because the cycle tourism that we know, they have higher spending than the tourists that doesn't cycle. I'll come back to that in the next slide. And then one of the things that in economic terms is quite important is how we spend our money. And cycle tourists, they are very good at spreading their spending. They go to the grocery shop, they pay for the accommodation, they buy an ice cream, they maybe visit an attraction, they go to a restaurant. So they spread their spending on a lot of businesses, and that's quite important for the local economy. Cyclists spend more money. That has been investigated in Denmark. The Danish figures, but every time we bring a tourist on a bicycle, they spend a little more money than they would have if they didn't cycle. We don't know exactly why, but we know that cycle tourists, they are more active in general when they are on their holiday. They go more to restaurants. They visit more attractions. They do more shopping. They probably also eat a bit more because they get hungry. So they spend more money, and that's something that's a good argument to tourist destinations. Bring people on bikes, and they will spend more money, and they will spread their spending on more businesses. Well, one of the big questions is, I think, not only in the tourist industry, is how will the world look like after COVID-19? Is it just a bracket? We go back to normal as soon as we are all vaccinated, or will it be something new? Is it a wake-up call for a new and more sustainable tourism, or is it back to business as usual? I'm not what is it called? I'm not. I don't see the future for me, but I can see there are some tendencies, at least in Denmark, which is pointing in a direction, but also I see it also very, maybe a bit skeptical, because I also feel there's a strong force of bringing things back to normal, because there's a lot of businesses are really heavily dependent on international tourism. But some of the issues that is getting an increasing importance also in Denmark is over tourism. We are not, we're not there yet, but we see areas in Denmark where, say, the growth of tourism makes, say, the lives for the inhabitants increasingly not so comfortable. I have areas in Copenhagen where there are at some days so many tourists that it's not pleasant to be there as an inhabitant. We also last year we also saw it in some of the nature areas, actually, that some municipalities had to close down walking routes due to, say, over tourism. There were too many people on the walking routes. So it is a phenomenon that is getting increasingly important. Non-sustainable tourism. You can put the cruise ships on the slide, but non-sustailable tourism can also be other things than cruise ships. But it is, of course, also a very important issue with Denmark has a goal of reducing its CO2 with 70% before 2030. and the tourism industry is also a big say polluter. Another issue is exclusive tourism. Do we have a tourism that is, say, open for all, or is it exclusive to some of the groups? I think cycling tourism has this democratic aspect. It is for everyone. You don't need to be rich to go on a cycle tour. And then Jan also mentioned it. This inactive lifestyle we have. In general, not only as tourists, we sit way too much. A Danish professor in health has now analyzed that more than half of the Danish population is overweight. So that's a new normal to be overweight in Denmark. And say, more important than being overweight is that we are moving way too little. So that's also an issue. And the bike is the solution to many of these issues. It's active transportation. It's a good way of spreading people around a country. So of course that is a solution to some of the problems. If we can bring more people to experience country cities on a bike, then we have a very sustainable tourism, which is also good for the public health, and still creates jobs in the countries. So the benefits of cycling tourism. Just have some water here. The economic recovery and job creation. It is a big industry in itself, but also jobs related to the cycling tourism. Sorry. A sustainable tourism is when we cycle, we use a very CO2 friendly form of transportation. And then what is also very important that if we develop a good cycling country for tourists, we at the same time also make recreational offers for the local population. Those two things goes very much hand in hand. Could also turn it around, make recreational offers for the local population, and you have a good offer for the tourists that visit the country. That's the same issues, and that's also a connection to the Monday transport, as Jan mentioned. It can very well be the same infrastructure and can be the same promotion tools that bring people on bicycles on a Monday as well as on a Sunday. Better public health is one of the benefits, and also livable cities and rural areas. We meet and interact when we cycle. We can stop wherever we want. I think that's one of the reasons why it's actually better to have a shopping street that is designed for cyclists than a shopping street designed for cars. The cyclists, they spend more money in the shops than the people going in a car. That has also been analyzed. And then we occupy limited space, which is a big factor in many of the urban areas. So, a bit about how to develop cycling. Tourism, as I think it's some of the same tools for developing a good cycling country then also applies to a cycling tourism country. Safe infrastructure. Also, the casualty figures that was presented just before is very frightening numbers. So safe infrastructure is of course very important if we want more people to get more people on the bicycles. I think that the figure in Copenhagen is that there's a reported injury or a reported accident for every 1.2 kilometers we cycle. So it is, as Jan also mentioned, it is very safe to cycle in Copenhagen, also for small children. And I also do it every day with my children. We cycle around, and I feel perfectly safe. Bicycles and service, because you need bicycles, either own bicycles or a good offer of rental bikes. Service, bicycle restore shops, other services could be also places where you can drop your luggage and go on a bike tour. Wayfinding for cyclists, information that also makes it more pleasant and more safe to cycle. Products like guided tour helps people who are not familiar with the surroundings to go on a tour. Communication and marketing, and a cycling friendly traffic culture. Just a few pictures supporting that after this slide. Some of the motives for cycling. Why do we cycle in Copenhagen? We cycle because it's practical and fast. We don't cycle because it's healthy. We don't cycle because it's good for the environment. Number one reason is it's practical and fast. It's the fastest way of getting through the city. Looking at the cycle tourist motives, most tourists, they say it's because we want to experience the nature and the landscape. One important thing is also experience the city like a local. The everyday cycling, the Monday cycling in Copenhagen is actually an attraction in itself. People, they stop. Jan has probably also experienced, they stop to take photos of us when we cycle. That's very interesting. Being together, the people factor, you meet people when you're on a bike. I think that's very important. And then the real freedom of movement. We do have congestion on the cycle streets in Copenhagen, but you have that's only at some certain times of the day. You actually can experience this real freedom of movement, which is something the car industry puts a lot of effort into to telling us this illusion of freedom when you have a car, where the reality is more like on the picture on the right, that you're stuck in traffic. That's a different picture when you're on a bike. Well, some of the points that makes a good cycling country: the infrastructure. Here, two pictures of Copenhagen, these separated bike lanes on the right, where you can, I think this is also the principle of Jan, where you have the cars securing the cyclist and not the opposite. The cyclist is securing the cars. You can ride on your own stretch of asphalt, and you're perfectly safe. The picture on the left is a cycle lane through a cemetery in Copenhagen, where you're also allowed to cycle. We also have some iconic infrastructure in Copenhagen. Cycle bridges, where it's not only safe, but it's also a very big part of the promotion of Copenhagen as a good cycling city. Dedicated parking areas. We want to stop. That's where we spend money as tourists. We don't spend money when we cycle. We need to stop, and when we stop, we need to have good places where we can park our bikes, secure spaces. That's still a demand for more secure parking spaces in a city like Copenhagen, but it is very important if you want to. You also need to consider where to park the bikes when you first have them on the bike. Public transportation, that's a big asset for the capital region in Denmark, that you can bring your bike on the public transportation for free. You don't need a ticket for your bike. That has increased the number of bikes on the public trains very, very much, and it's a very good way of increasing your range. services, bike rental shops, especially for the tourists. Not every tourist bring their own bikes to Denmark, probably also to the Philippines. So you need to have a good provider of rental bikes, and other service like a bike repair stand is also a good thing. It makes it more comfortable to go on a bike if you can get a repair. Routes, the infrastructure, that's the basic. We need good infrastructure to cycle on, but especially for the tourist, it's also very important to have some dedicated routes where you say you should go along these bicycle lanes because you will have a great tour around. In this example, the city of Copenhagen, where we have this harbor route. It's only 11 kilometers long. But you go past some of these bridges that you saw on the pictures before, and it's a very safe stretch of infrastructure. It also has this advantage that you're away from the big intersections into the city, where you have lots of bicycle traffic, especially in the morning and in the afternoon. So you can ride in your own speed and just enjoy the city. That's a very good way of getting more tourists on bikes. But also, local people who maybe not so used, or a bit afraid of getting out in normal morning traffic. It's also a way of adapting to the cycle traffic in the city. Wayfinding. We are, as car drivers, we are completely used to have signposting. We always, everywhere I went with a car, at least, we know exactly where to put ourselves on the roads. We know when to go right, when to go left. There's still also in Denmark a very big lack of wayfinding for cyclists. The city of Copenhagen has done some great things in this aspect, where we have signposting in the city showing the length, but also the time to go to different places. And I think that the time is very interesting here in the city because, as I mentioned, the bike is nearly always the more efficient way of transport. Digital tools, just as an example of one of our digital tools, we need to get inspiration, and most people, by far most people, they seek information on the internet. So then you need to have a good offer of routes, tour suggestions, where to rent a bicycle on the internet. That's definitely a must today. And then what is probably the big attraction in a city like Copenhagen is the cycle culture. Many tourists come to Copenhagen to be like a Copenhagener, and the cycle culture is very strong. Most of our trips are done by bicycles. These figures show that. We still have cars in the city, that's definitely. But there is a strong cycling culture, and that's something also the tourists, they would like to experience. As the ambassador mentioned earlier, it can be a bit frightening if the first time you go on a bicycle in Copenhagen as a tourist, because we tend to go quite fast when we go to work or to school. So I would recommend that you, as a tourist in Denmark, you don't go between 8 or 9 in the morning, and maybe also not between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Hi Jesper. Sorry, I need to cut you a little bit. We need to wrap up for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Super. I only have two more slides. And the cycle culture is is so strong that we also cycle in the winter time. This is a picture of Copenhagen in the winter. They don't look too happy, but they do cycle. Some takeaways here at the end. Make it safe, easy and fun to cycle for everybody. Convert existing tourists to cycle tourists. That's more easy than attract cycle tourists in itself. Promote cycling to local inhabitants and tourists. Can very well be the same measures. And then reach out to organizations, businesses, people, cooperate and co-create. It's a matter of cooperation to establish a great cycling country and a great cycling city. And measure your efforts. We've also talked about it earlier. It's very important that you can document that it's actually bringing change. That you see more cyclists. That's very important to have good data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jesper. Unfortunately, we are all time limited, and that's always the issue during these webinars. But we'll try to squeeze it as much as possible. And this really gives us another perspective on how to maximize the tourism industry through bicycles. More on that later with our panelists. I'll introduce them shortly. I really like the economic benefits you mentioned through spread spending, but also the fact that cyclists all spend more money during their tours. Cycling tourism is quite new to the Philippines. However, it cannot be denied that there is a reasonable market potential and definitely something to look into. Is there actually a potential for bike tourism? Will bike tourism spur creation of jobs? Is sustainable tourism the way forward? Will the current and future infrastructure lead the way for an increase in bicycle tourism? I hope some of these questions can be addressed by you and by our four panelists here with us today. We have first Mr. Rap Drilon from Iloilo City. He's a bike and tourism advocate and also an artist. If you could show your screen, Rap. Say hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yep.
Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Nice to have you here. And then second, we have Christine Manzanares, Regional Director of Western Visayas.
Good afternoon again.
Hello. We have Attorney Asido, the Intramuros Administrator.
Afternoon.
Thanks so much for being a guest here, Attorney. And we have Brian McClellan, finally, of BAM Bikes, and also an advocate for sustainable use of bamboos. Hello, Brian.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to have you here. So, Rock, maybe you could run us through the presentation. John, can you please show the presentation from Iloilo, care of Rock?
Okay. Yes. Seems listening to the speaker, seems Iloilo has all the ingredients, for a potential bike tourism destination. First one is Iloilo won the bike friendly city a few years back. Not necessarily because only of the bikes, but because also of the behavior of the motorists toward bikers, which has improved in the past years. Yes, can you run some pictures? Yes, even the advocate here, we're working already pro bono through the years, doing bike tourism for free. So it's about time. Though there were already attempts to make it to professionalize it, but the pandemic came, and so it kind of stopped. But I think we can still pursue this. For example, this is an art bike, which is a tour of the museums and galleries around the city. So you have the map, and then some pictures. The one to your right is the latest street art. We have about, as of counting, we have about 40 around the city of murals and public art. This one is, the one to your right is beside the bike lane. No? Half of these murals are located along bike lanes, the bike routes. Okay, next. So in the coming festival, we're thinking of the tour of the murals on bicycles. So we also have the visitor. For example, we had a guest, Javi Severino. We gave him a tour, and for him to pay us, he do a Q&A with the bikers that were participating. So that's one of the murals that you see. That's one of the heritage buildings that you see, the provincial capital. Next picture. Yes, we also have. We also do eco tours. No, the one you see, the one to the left is a heritage house, so it should belong to the other tour. This one is in Katungan. It's a mangrove forest of about 15 hectares, about 4 kilometers from the city. And this, the lower portion picture is a mangroves along the Iloilo River, and it provides a shade also to the bike lane or to the bikers. It's one of my favorite bike lanes in the city. So next, please. Next picture. We also have the tour of the bridges. There's the Ilonggo ones who believe that if you complete touring the 8 bridges, now there are more 8 bridges during the time. In a day, you will have a better life or something like that. So these bridges have other names, like the Carpenter's Bridge is the Bridge of Love, the one to the right. The one to the left, I think it's the Diversion Bridge, or the Bridge of Progress, no? I think. Recently, the local artists here have painted the bridges, you know, to become art bridges, like the one you see on the left. The one to the right is a bridge, actually. Yes, that bikers are allowed to cross. And there are bike racks in that on the other side of the benches. Next, please. We also have Iloilo by night. The bridges are lighted. Some heritage houses are lighted. So when we usually use the internet to have participants, no? But this and all initiatives by bike advocates, bike groups in the past, and the only way to do it is to now that we have the infra and the support of the local and national government, maybe we can, and the tourism office, maybe we can professionalize this. No? The pro bono groups and advocates can help install private groups who are willing to professionalize these initiatives. Next, please. We also have Bicicleta Iglesia. So you bike from one church to another. No? This is an initiative we did in Manila before when I was living there. But I continued it in Iloilo because Iloilo has so many beautiful churches. So this is part 2 of the tour of the churches on bicycles. Next, please. Oh yes, the bikers here are proactive. They planted mangroves along the river. And after 4 or 5 years, you see at the bottom, the mangroves have grown, so they keep the river clean, provide a sanctuary for the fish, and the fruit of the labor has really is now noticeable with fishermen fishing along the river, catching large fishes. So the bikers are part of development. No? Later, these mangroves can also provide shade to the bikers, bike along the river. I guess, we have to secure the bike lanes. We have protected bike lanes here. If you include the painted bike lanes, I think you have closely 80 kilometers of bike lane. And the present mayor's objective is to connect the bike lanes, and then to connect the plazas. When you connect the plazas, you now have bike lanes that will cruise through markets, hospitals, schools. We even have a bike lane that is called University Loop that connects 9 schools and universities. So these bike lanes are being patrolled by policemen on bicycles. Next, please. Oh, we have the bike festival, Bike Festival, which has helped so much in developing a bike culture in Iloilo. We had it for in the past 8 years, and it's not just a fun ride, but it is a week-long festival with summits, exhibition of hardware, exhibition of art bikes, cycling hearts, exhibitions, which is artists interpreting the bicycles in different mediums, paintings, sculptures, installations, videos. This is part. This is how the bike festival comes. The fun ride where people paint their bodies, wear costumes, and so it becomes very, very interesting. So people are looking forward to the next bike festival, but it has been suspended for the past 2 years. But I think the mayor will soon resume it because of the thrust in bike tourism. Next. Oh yes, bike racks are needed. So the mayor installed 50 bike racks around the city, in markets, in hospitals, in the esplanades, in the open spaces, in the plazas. What we did is we gathered 50 local artists, and each bike rack is the artist would do it. So we have a generic design, but 50 different designs all over the city. One bike rack, this one, which has 2, can accommodate 6 to 7 bikes. So in certain places, like public places where there are more demands, we put 2 or 3 or 4. In the city hall, the mayor put 4 of these, which can accommodate 4 times 6, about 25 bikes. So if you have cars, it will fill up the whole the whole parking space of Iloilo. So next, please. Oh yeah, thank you for your attention. So that's one of the murals of the city. Now about 40 of them, and it keeps it keeps up. Some by private groups, most of them by the city government, and some by artists just doing it on their own. initiatives. Okay, can we play the video of how a protected bike lane would look like in Iloilo?
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, Rock, we're limited to our time here, so we're trying to stick to the schedule. So, but thank you so much for the presentation, and hope you can stay for the questions from the public. Jesper, maybe before commenting on that, I'd like to call on Brian McClellan first, since he would have to attend another meeting to speak and hopefully share his insight.
Hi guys, thanks for accommodating me. I'm Brian McClellan, founder of BAM Bike. We have ecotourism based in Intramuros, and we've been there since 2014. I'll just offer a couple of my comments and thank you guys to the speakers. It's great to hear your perspectives and learn from your experience. And a couple of things, to note. One is we found that bikers definitely do like to spend a little more. That's why a couple of years ago, I put up a ice cream, coffee, and local craft beer bar in the same building next to our bike shop. So we can service your bike, we can get you thirsty, get you going around, and then also pour you a pint, have you a scoop of ice cream, and give you your caffeine fix. So that's been a very good synergy for us. And just to kind of reiterate some of the points, seeing the changes during the pandemic and having local governments mandated and now continually implementing more bicycle lanes has been really great. As a daily cyclist in Manila, I have seen a slight improvement. Let's say it's a good start, and we're happy to see that there are, incremental changes taking place. And as a biking advocate and part of the community, I'd love to see more and more people starting to feel more comfortable. So from the DOT to the LGUs, it's working. We get feedback and people are saying that, they are feeling more comfortable biking, and there's more engagements and work to be done, but we're making some progress. So bit by bit. And now happy to announce that just this week we were able to reopen our bike rentals in Intramuros. So that's starting to kick off, and then hopefully with the advice from our government and the task forces, we will be able to do the guided bike tours again soon. I'm optimistic, and unfortunately I'm out of time, and I know we have to move forward. So thank you guys for the opportunity to speak. I'm hosting another meeting here regarding some ecotourism in Batangas that we're developing. So I've got to run because my guests and attendees have arrived. So thank you again, and forgive me for jetting off, but I appreciate it. Take care, everyone, and bam buhay.
Thank you so much, Brian. Maybe Jan and Jesper can do the tours when they're here after all this craziness going on.
I'll be happy to host you, and I'll pour you a beer myself.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Take care of it.
All right. Let's move on to Christine. If you have any comments, please chime in.
Thank you again, Angelo, and good afternoon to all. So in Region 6 now, biking is a growing outdoor recreation. It is a sustainable and healthy way of exploring the region. So the Department of Tourism, through the Department of Tourism Promotions Board, provided branding support to Iloilo. So it was comprehensively shared earlier by Mr. Rock Grilon. We are allocating 10 million under the Tourism Promotions Board for the bike capital and safe tourist destination branding of Iloilo. And we wanted to expand this recreational network in the region. So apart from Iloilo, we will be tapping other sites, including Boracay for biking. So part of our recovery plan is to enhance our domestic tourism offerings, which is also under the leadership of Admin Gilier here. So we are creating a bike circuit within Region 6. And we have conducted series of consultations because we also wanted to have this acceptance of the community of this type of tourism. So we had initial meetings already in the case of Boracay development with our local government unit. our bike associations there and the service providers. And we're trying also to identify the infrastructure needs in the area, signages, rest areas, and other support services, including bike repair shops, accommodation establishments, and tourism-related enterprises. And we are also gathering policy support from various local government units, not only in Iloilo and Bacolod. Currently, they have already bike ordinances, but in other areas who wanted to promote biking as part of their tourism offering, we need to provide this support, a policy that would guide us in making our bike lanes and bike areas safe. And identifying of scenic, low traffic, and off the beaten track routes in the region. It's also on, it's in the pipeline. We are also trying to get the demographics of bikers in the region. So identifying if they are young professionals, they are from what province or region, their age and income, and what are their preferences to help us out also later on in the marketing side. And we have noticed also here that there are events that are being organized for bikers, and some are independently created. We are also identifying biking trails. Later on, we will include suggested activities along the way. And earlier, it was presented by Mr. Pørksen that cyclists spend more money. So this is the main goal of the domestic tourism promotional effort that we are doing in the region, is to steer the local tourism economy of communities along the biking route, especially those in the rural areas. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for the valuable input. Let me now jump to Attorney Asido, if you have anything to share, and then after that, Jesper can also comment on the feedback from the panelists.
Yeah. Thank you, Angelo. Let me just emphasize a few points, and basically, this is coming off from the discussions made by Jesper and Gehl. But the value of the discussion basically is the fact that in terms of looking at cycling tourism as a product itself, it gives credence to the fact that it's very authentic, and that it basically addresses to you the value of mobility, quality of life, and health. And of course, as what Rock Trilon and Regional Director Tin is doing right now, add the spice of creativity in the tourism product by itself. Now, seeing the authenticity of the product of the tourism product itself, you will have that flexibility to ensure as well its sustainability of the bike tourism. But one important matter I believe that Jesper pointed out is the need to build this culture of cycle culture, and that will be needed to ensure as well that this will not just be a one-time product. So developing this culture means that you just not focus on the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure, but also the soft infrastructure as well. So that means ensuring that you have the proper content in terms of ensuring the diversity of using the product as your main anchor. Now, with respect to the hard infrastructure, I believe that one focus should be is that we should see it basically not just as a exclusive within one city or one municipality or one district. We should ensure that it be integrated as well into an overall transportation plan as well, like for the whole metropolis or for the whole region. So that will ensure as well that we build on this cycle of cycle tourism culture. Yeah. Thank you, Angelo.
Thanks a lot for that great insight, Attorney Asido. I'll leave it to Jesper, maybe 1 to 2 minutes for your feedback from the panelists' side.
Yeah, thank you, all of you, for insights and comments. Rock, thank you very much for sharing these inspiring activities you have done, and it really shows a lively cycling culture in Ilo. Sorry. But also, I think what is also very important is it's the bike connected to something else. Bike and art, bike and nature preservation.
Nature, art, heritage, and a lot of other values that we want to preserve and restore.
Exactly, and I think that's also an important point, that the bike can do different things. It can be an activity in itself, but it can also be an activity connected to other activities, and it can be pure transportation to a interesting point like a church or things like that. That the bike has many it can be used in many ways, and that was very inspiring what you showed. To Brian, also very good to hear say a private company pushing for better infrastructure, and I think that's also the reason why it's very important to have say both people, advocates, but also private businesses saying they're creating a demand by giving a service like bike rental. This demand can also push for better infrastructure, and that's that again can give Brian a better business, because more people would like to cycle in Intramuros. Christine, you mentioned also this what I think is this opportunity of creating a new tourism, but with the same economic impact. It doesn't, if every cyclist spend a little bit more money than the usual cyclist, we can maybe we need not as many tourists maybe, and the footprints of every tourist will be more or less if they go around by bicycle. And Asido, you also. What I also tried to highlight in my presentation was this importance of authentic cycling culture, because why should the tourists go on a bike if the local population would never consider going on a bike? I think that's very important for the sustainability of the cycling tourism, that you also have a local population going around on a bicycle. And you also mentioned this about Intramuros and what's around Intramuros. I also think it's what we are very much pushing for in Denmark is this, say, a national plan for developing the cycling country and the cycling tourism country, because we can't keep the cyclists within administrative borders. They would like, if they are very happy about cycling in Intramuros, they also want to explore the rest of Metro Manila and the rest of the Philippines in another holiday. So the importance of have some national policies on the issue is also very important. So thank you, all of you, for your comments.
Yes, thank you so much, Jesper, and thank you to our panelists for the very interesting insight and exchange. Yeah, maybe I can start already with the Q&A before we end the program from the public. We do have a few questions here. I will start with one that maybe can be addressed to Jan. Does bike infrastructure work without cultivating a healthy public realm in the city? In the Metro Manila context, some bike lanes that we design function like car lanes as rigid areas to facilitate bike movement. Metro Manila has little walkability, narrow sidewalks, no trees, limited open spaces. In pushing for bike infrastructure, should we cultivate a healthy public realm where streets and open spaces are where people linger and interact as well? Can biking culture grow without lively open spaces and a healthy public realm?
Okay.
It's a lot of questions, but yeah.
Definitely, you must put the people first. and we are all pedestrians. Even the bicyclists, they also are pedestrians. And there are many more people walking than people biking. So for God's sake, make a concerted effort to make a good walking environment, a good environment for human activities, and then also for bicycling. Originally, when I did my studies in my first book, there's not one word about bicycling. It's all about people in cities. Later on, we started to realize that bicyclists are a sort of people. They are fast pedestrians, and they sort of are people, but they are very special people, but they are part of the life of a city. But start with the people, start with the pedestrians and the public life, because that is the most general thing. So don't focus too much on the bicycles if you don't have the other thing in place.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jan. Maybe Robert, you can also comment on how is it in Pasig? Sorry, Robert, your audio is not here. Can you try to open and close your audio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, excellent. I think a lot of people, when they start to learn about bicycle infrastructure, like most people start to learn about it by seeing examples. Of course, in like places like Copenhagen and Denmark and in the Netherlands, where you have really nice infrastructure surrounded by lots of trees, lots of public realm. And I think some people have the impression that if you can't do that, then maybe you should just give up on this dream of making your city a better cycling city. And while I think we also shouldn't lower our standards, we also need to really have that dream of having a great cycling city. I would say we shouldn't be discouraged from trying to make even changes that focus first on cyclist safety, even if you can't get the political will for the entire transformation all at once. I think it's really important to note that whether you like it or not, your city is going to become a cycling city. It's going to become a pedestrian city. It's going to become a public transportation city, just because of whether people like it or not. Because I think there's just no other way for motorization to continue and proceed at the same pace it has in Metro Manila. So I think either you make cycling safer, you make walking safer for the people that are going to choose it anyway, or you ignore it and deal with the consequences, and it just gets worse from there. So even if you can't have the perfect solution overnight, I feel like we all just need to do what we can to make our city a little better.
Thank you so much for that, Robert. Great insight. I'll read some comments from the public also, from Violeta Munoz. Congratulations. I believe that the use of the bike as a sport is indeed ingrained in the values of the Danish, because Crown Prince Frederick and Crown Princess Mary are the role models themselves. From Relly Castillo from Zoom, sidewalks should be walkable and free from any obstruction. Government should subsidize costs of bicycles so there will be bikes for every member of the family. Is this possible? Thank you. Maybe some of our panelists from maybe DOH, Dasha, are you still with us? Can comment on that. Okay, I believe Dasha is not with us at the moment, but I'll continue with questions. Anyone of the panelists can answer. There are people here in the Philippines who argue that pedestrianization or making cities walkable or bikeable is not feasible because we live in a tropical country that is hot and humid. How do we encounter this argument, and are there literature or studies that to show them as proof that their argument does not hold water? Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
I specifically mentioned Singapore. They have also a very hot and very humid climate. And still there are lots of people walking, and also they are introducing bicycle structures in a number of districts to because they try to reduce the car driving and try to promote public transportation, and then they expand the mobility of the pedestrians by saying you can either walk or you can pedal down to the stations. So they have this notion of not too fast bicycling, but slow bicycling, and also not too fast walking, because the climate is not for that during the day. But during the evening and during the morning, it's another situation. So it is certainly, you can see around in tropical climates that people are always people. They are Homo sapiens. They are not born with a car on their back. Most of everything is happening when you are not in a car, and that you have to make your human habitations in such a way that you can, sorry about this.
No worries, Jan.
That you have to make your human habitation so that the daily life can go on for all citizens, being they very young or very old or anybody in between. We are born as a walking animal, and we have to make the cities basically for Homo sapiens, whether he is walking or maybe he is pedaling. And in any climate, also in Greenland, they do it. That's another.
Thanks for that, Jan. And also there are, there's a new trend with e-bikes. You can also use e-bikes. So there are a lot of options to get from point A to point B. You don't have to work for it because there are machines that can do it for you. So there are a number of options. Maybe last one or two questions from Luisito Gepuela. Zoom, how do we promote inclusive, participatory, meaningful, and people-centered city policies amidst resistance from city leaders? I think this has some similarities to some of the commonly asked questions during these webinars. No? Any of the panelists could answer that?
If I may, Angelo, I think the one way of ensuring it is that you basically promote and practice inclusivity properly. So to some consultations and stakeholder conferences are mere lip service. So I think you should go beyond that to ensure that when you do or before you do enact any rule or regulation, particularly that will have implications on people's lives and the way that they are living it at the moment, there should really be proper dialogue and ensure that this is not just mere lip service, and that you should be able to see to it that whatever will be the result of the dialogue is properly communicated to them as well, that you have considered everything before you actually adopt the policy itself.
Yeah, great input. I agree with Attorney Asido. Engage the community, engage the public and private stakeholders. They have a say. We all have a say. Even the automotive industry, you have to get them on board as well. Any comments to that, Jesper or Jan, before we end the show?
I have a general advice. Get the data. Make the people walking and the people bicycling, make them properly visible to the politicians and to everyone. That is the method we have used in cities all over the world. We do exactly like the traffic engineers. The traffic engineers have for 50 years used the method that they go and count the traffic, and then they make plans for how the traffic should be developed. Now, in many cities, we have data about the public life, the pedestrians and the bicycles, so that we can properly plan for them, and we can demonstrate how many there are and how much they need your concern and care. Get the data and trust in God.
Thank you so much for that, Jan. Unfortunately, yes, we are limited to. Actually, we are over our schedule right now, so we'll wrap this up. Thank you very much to our speakers, Jan and Jesper, to our ever-engaging panelists, and to our audience for joining us. It truly was an interesting and useful exchange. What we learned from this session is that bicycles and green spaces are there for a purpose, which we sometimes take for granted. And the simple act of taking the more scenic route by bike or by walking, whether it be for errands or leisure, is already a happy human experience and something that we consciously or subconsciously yearn for in our everyday lives. Imagine a city where everywhere is scenic and lots of trees and lots of shade and lots of areas to connect. How nice is that? And yes, connecting to your community, nature and the environment is an equally important human experience. And that is something as simple as riding a bicycle can actually offer. I would now pass the virtual floor back to Ambassador Grete Silesen for the final remarks.
Thank you very much, Angelo. And so much good has been said. It's been a pleasure listening in. And since we are past the indicated time of ending this, I would just limit myself to saying that biking is sustainable, biking is healthy, and biking is fun. And therefore we should make sure that basically that biking is possible and that biking is safe. So thank you, everybody. And let's keep working together in this. It is possible. There will always be resistance to new ideas, but it's growing. And we would like to be there from the Danish Embassy to see the trend growing. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. For the next, it will be with the Dutch Embassy and the Dutch Cycling Embassy. That would be the next Intramuros Learning Session. We're planning that for July. And the third will be a dialogue between the automotive and the cycling community in the Philippines on road safety and etiquette, which will be possibly in August. That should be very interesting also. Thanks again, everyone. And on behalf of the Danish Embassy and Intramuros, have a good, safe, and healthy weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.